It is Wednesday. It is 10 a.m. here on the East Coast. Time for MLB Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com. Adam, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, man?
Doing good. Excited to talk baseball. Got pretty much my fill of basketball yesterday, so nice to switch sports.
I think there's some of us that are a little more frustrated with basketball than others, especially if you had a lot of Clippers last night.
Yeah, no question. That was, I think, the most pathetic effort in a game that matters that I've ever seen. Like it was almost like you felt sad watching it. Like that was the only emotion I felt like watching the fourth quarter of that game.
I think I turned the game off when Paul George attempted a three from the corner and he hit the side of the backboard. I'm like, yeah, it's over.
Yeah, it was just so bad. Like it was embarrassing. And I say that not as a Clippers fan or I didn't even have money on the game. I just felt it made me feel bad watching the game.
Man, I mean, the Nuggets down 3-1 in both series have come back. I mean, a job they've been able to do. But, of course, we are here to talk about today's MLB action. Of course, we are sponsored by Yahoo. Let's take a look back at what happened last night. If I told you the one complete game last night was coming from Coors Field, what would you have said?
Well, I just found that out, so I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah,
I was able to turn baseball off real quick last night. So
yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Cincinnati goes 9 innings, 3 strikeouts, 1 earned run. Last night was obviously a night where, doing Live Before Lock with Alex, we were talking about all those high-end pitchers, but really it was the value pitchers that if you went to last night, you did a great job there. Urquidy for Houston, 7 innings, 7 strikeouts, only gives up 1 earned run. Dane Dooning, 7 innings pitched for White Sox, kept 7 Ks, 1 earned run. And if you went with a Brewers or Yankee stack, you did pretty damn well because Brewers scoring 18 runs against the Cardinals. The Yankees put a 20 spot against the Blue Jays. And if you had a 1-2 stack of 2 hitters from the Yankees lineup, Matthew, 4 for 6, 5 RBIs, 3 run scores. Voit, 3 for 5, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 3 runs scored.
Yeah, they got off to a quick start. I think they had 12 runs in the first 3 innings. You knew pretty quickly if you didn't have the Yankees, you were not winning last night.
Yeah, I had mentioned that I thought that was a little bit of a sneaky stack just based on what we were seeing in the top stack tool yesterday. And Stan now back for the Yankees. We'll see how that does go affect for their line. Do want to let you know today over at Awesemo.com, our free premium content of the day is MLB Lineup Builder. So be sure to check that out today at Awesemo.com. We got a 9-game main slate tonight. Going to start off at 7:05. The first game we're going to talk about here, Adam, is the Mets and the Phillies. Jacob deGrom going for the Mets, and Zach Wheeler scheduled to go for the Phils.
Yeah, so then I'm on the wrong day on my page. Now I understand why it didn't make sense. But yeah, I mean Wheeler, the strikeout numbers this year have been really, really concerning for him. Obviously, you have a long track record of him being a good pitcher, but the numbers really just haven't been there this year. He's not striking guys out at the same rate you're used to, and then now. A tough matchup against the Mets as well. So not too interested there. DeGrom on the other side, I think a tough matchup for him, but obviously one of the best pitchers in baseball. So if you're looking at these two pitchers, I think the salary is close enough where you're going to prefer DeGrom.
Yeah, I remember last night when I was putting together my pitching sheet for today's show. Initially, Nola was slated on DraftKings, but it will be Zach Wheeler, 9,000 for him. Jacob deGrom, 10,400 on DraftKings. The Mets yesterday going up against the right-hander. They went pretty much with, I want to say 7 of the 9 batters in the lineup were lefties. So I would imagine that's probably something we see again today.
Yeah, most likely. And they're good left-handed hitters too. So looking at Wheeler, this year, I still expect the strikeout numbers to come up closer to his career averages, but they just haven't been there yet. He is throwing more sinkers this year, which tends to lead to fewer swings and misses. 19% strikeout percentage against lefties. He's only allowed a 106 ISO. So he's still doing a good job of limiting power. And it's not really a pitcher that I love taking hitters against unless he's getting a bunch of ownership, which I doubt will be the case. But it definitely doesn't set up as a matchup where I'm really excited to get to Wheeler either.
In terms of DeGrom, 10,400 DK, 11,700 on FanDuel, $58 on Yahoo. Is he kind of a guy that's ultimately just going to kind of depend on ownership if you go that route?
Yeah, but I mean to some extent on ownership, but I obviously want to get to him. So ownership would have to get pretty high not to. I think that he's a little underpriced. You know, you've seen these top tier pitchers like on DraftKings recently getting up around 11 or 11.5, only 10-4 on the ground, coming in with almost a 38% strikeout percentage this year, only walking 6% of hitters. I mean, you know what you're getting out of him. He's a really good pitcher. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. And the only real negative is that the Phillies are a pretty solid offense, but they're also banged up. You know, you don't have Rhys Hoskins. This projected lineup kind of just looks nothing like it used to. Like, you have Alec Bond hitting third now. I mean, this guy got called up like a month ago and was hitting eighth for most of the time he was up. Phil Gosselin, Adam Hazley, Kingery, Andrew Knapp without Real Muto. Like, this is a very watered down version of the Philadelphia lineup that DeGrom should be able to just run through.
Yeah, it's I would imagine I'm going to have a good amount of shares of DeGrom. Don't really. In terms of those Mets bats, do you have a favorite bat in that lineup, or maybe a portion of the lineup that kind of interests you in terms of a stack?
Not really. I mean, I think the salary on Brandon Nimmo in particular, if he's leading off, is a little bit cheaper than it should be, just given his talent level. But Wheeler just does such a good job of limiting power and limiting production against him that even if he's not getting a lot of strikeouts, I think there's going to be enough spots to go to on a slate this big that don't really involve taking bats against one of the better pitchers.
And when you look at some of the higher options on the pitching slate on tonight's slate, Garrett Cole is going to be one of those pitchers going for the Yankees. 9,900 on DK, 11,500 on FanDuel, and $55 on Yahoo going against the Blue Jays. Tanner Rourke going to be on the hill for the Jays.
Yeah, Cole kind of looks like the other expensive pitcher that you're probably going to be really interested in. You know, at the top on this slate, you basically have DeGrom, Giolito, and Cole. Giolito facing the Twins, DeGrom and Cole not facing the Twins, which gives them the edge. Cole's salary is pretty inexpensive as well at only $9,900. You know, I think that you'll want to pay attention to ownership between him and DeGrom. I think that the edge does go to DeGrom, but obviously Cole comes in with a 33% strikeout percentage as well. So it's not like you're sacrificing a ton if you go to him over DeGrom. So I think DeGrom should be the higher owned out of the two, but I think that it should be relatively close. And Cole is pretty clearly underpriced for his strikeout ability. You know, you've seen him struggle some this year with home runs. He's allowing almost 2 home runs per 9 innings, and that's obviously a problem. But still coming, you know, like I said, coming in with about a 33% strikeout percentage. His expected ISO it's mostly been left-handed power. He's allowed a 319 ISO to lefties, 248 expected ISO there. You look at the Toronto lineup, you're basically going to be concerned with Kevin Biggio and Travis Shaw. So most of their power is from the right side, which is a good thing. Against righties this year, Cole's only allowed a 173 ISO, and he struck out 36%. So I think that the fact that there's limited left-handed power in the Toronto lineup sets up well for Cole also.
Obviously, we mentioned right at the beginning of the show, the Yankees were hot last night, 6 home runs. They come up with 16 hits, 20 runs scoring 7 runs in the second inning, 5 runs in the third inning, and another 4 runs in the fourth inning. I don't know if they're going to be a sneaky stack tonight like they were last night because of that performance.
Yeah, typically that will drive up ownership a little bit. Pricing on the Yankees, not too expensive on DraftKings. You know, you have DJ LeMahieu at the top at $5,500, but other than that, pretty inexpensive. You could have Aaron Judge back. He's only $4,800. You could have Gleyber Torres back. He's only $4,300. So I think it is a stack that will get some ownership just because they have an implied run total of 5.5. They are relatively affordable. They're obviously coming off of a big game. The matchup against Rourke is fine. He's kind of just always been a pitcher that gets by, doesn't strike out a ton of guys, isn't, you know, unhittable, but isn't a total gas can either. But someone like that facing this Yankees team that has so much power for the year, a 19.5% strikeout percentage and 2.5 home runs per 9 innings for Rourke. Obviously limited sample, you know, this season, but has struggled with home runs, particularly to right-handed bats, which is really surprising for him. Typically, he's been better against righties than lefties throughout his career, but this year he's only struck out 13% of righties while allowing a 395 expected ISO. Whatever he's struggling with, it clearly is mostly against right-handed hitters, and you have a lot of right-handed power in this lineup, most likely.
It was funny last night on the show. I almost mentioned Alex, like, is this a Gary Sanchez night? I should have mentioned it because he actually went out and got a home run last night.
Yeah, really rough year for him, but obviously he's still always someone I like getting to in my lineups if I can, especially if he's lower owned, because it's just so hard to find catchers that have power. And obviously to win a tournament, you need home runs. You're not really concerned about the times that Sanchez strikes out 4 times because who cares? You know, it's does he have the potential to give you a home run or two, which is more than you can say for so many catchers. So I do like getting to him. Of course, in the Yankees lineup, you have so many guys to choose from now that you also have Stanton back at a cheap salary. And then again, potentially getting Judge and Torres back. So certainly not a must play in your stacks, but I wouldn't be looking to avoid him either, despite the struggles he's had this year.
Anything on the Blue Jays hitting side that sticks out to you at all?
No, even Biggio and Shaw are relatively expensive. It would be one thing if you were getting one of them at like a $3K price tag or something, priced down for Cole, but you're not. Biggio comes in at $4,600, Shaw $4,100 on DraftKings. I don't really see the reason to go there.
Of course, this is the MLB Strategy Show for Wednesday, September 16th, and we are sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. They are the most trusted name in fantasy sports. They now include CSV edit and upload features. When you're looking to play those multiple lines, make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Next up, we got the Royals and the Tigers. Brady Singer, of course, knew he had that no-hitter in his last start on the hill for the Royals. Tarek Skubal going for the Tigers. When you look at Singer, $33 on Yahoo, $6,200 on DraftKings, and $8,000 on FanDuel. On the two pitcher sites, the Singer is. Do you look at him as a value pitcher today?
Yeah, without question. You know that the floor is really low. He's going to be inconsistent in general, but he does have pretty good stuff. It's just a matter of, he hasn't pitched prior to this year above, I think, high A. And so you're going to just kind of get mixed results from him, but he is fully stretched out. He is coming off of 119 pitches his last time out, which is a concern. Sometimes you'll see pitchers kind of fall back their next time out after flirting with a no-hitter because they throw so many pitches. So that is somewhat of a concern, but the salary is so cheap, the matchup's fine. But even prior to that last start, 95 and 95 pitches in his two starts before that, the strikeouts for him have been pretty average, 21.8% strikeout percentage, 8.5% walk percentage. But it's mostly just a salary thing, like you said. It's not so much a FanDuel play at 8K where you're only rostering one pitcher, but on Yahoo and DraftKings where you have to roster two of them and he's really inexpensive. There's the ceiling kind of outweighs the floor at that salary.
Yeah, you look at his $6,200 price. We've only got three pitchers lower than that: Aiken, Gibson, and Smith. We're going to see. Obviously, we'll talk about San Francisco, Seattle. We think Smiley and Newsom could be the stars. Maybe it's Anderson who was supposed to start last time when that game was canceled. So that's going to be something we're going to play on. But if you're looking for that value at SB2, I mean, he's got to be a guy that's in that consideration. Unless maybe you want to, maybe you're looking at going up in that just under 8K range.
Yeah, I think if you're paying down for sure. I mean, like you mentioned, Keegan Aiken, he's got a tough matchup against Atlanta down in that price range. Kyle Gibson's really cheap, but he's facing Houston, which of course isn't a spot that you're going to love to go to. Caleb Smith's facing the Angels, and that's pretty much the price range. So I think Singer is probably the best value down there. It is a spot though where you want to pay attention to ownership. I mean, it's still a pitcher with a very wide range of outcomes. He very easily can just go get 6 points here and not help you at all. If a large percentage of the field is going to him, then you can just kind of go with different roster construction approaches. But with Cole on this slate, with DeGrom on this slate, I think you'll see enough ownership going to the top that it's probably going to be reasonable ownership on Singer.
With kind of the up and downs of both these pitchers in this game, do you look at a game stack potentially of hitting on both sides of the teams here?
To some extent. If Singer's getting a lot of ownership, it makes the Tigers more appealing because you're able to leverage against the field. And if the Tigers do well, then a lot of the field is losing because they have Singer. If Singer's ownership isn't as high as it should be, then I would rather just be getting to Singer. The Tigers, not the best offense, obviously, and there are some really good offenses on this slate. As far as Skubal goes, he's been throwing 65, 70 pitches. The Royals, I think, are pretty fairly priced. You do have four guys in this projected lineup at $2,300 or less on DraftKings. That means that it's probably a stack that's going to get some ownership because you can go Cole plus DeGrom plus Royals and get a really, really high projection. Mm-hmm. So, do pay attention to that, but there is some good value in the Kansas City lineup.
Yeah, I always look at the Royals. I mean, Sal Perez at the catcher spot is always someone that is going to be someone I'm considering rostering. I mean, when you look at, potential Royal stack that, really that 1 through, 4 stack you look at, I mean, they did not farewell last night, only getting 5 hits, getting shut out in that game. Of course, the Tigers, they got up early 5-0 and cruised with a 6-0 lead on that. In terms of the Tigers bats, what do you like in that lineup?
Mostly a full stack to leverage against Singer. Like there's no one bat that I think really stands out as a great option because there's just better hitters throughout other lineups. But like I had said, if Singer's ownership does get elevated, then just getting 5 bats against him from Detroit helps you leverage against the field.
Of course, if you're looking to build your lineups right now over at Awesemo.com, our free premium content today is the MLB lineup builder. Check that out as we go on throughout the day over at Awesemo.com, as we have free content daily for you to check out over there. Next up, we'll move over to the Braves and the Orioles. I had a lot of Braves last night. Did not work out the way I had hoped it would work out, but it is something that they could potentially be in another spot here. Cole Hamels getting the start for the Braves, and Keegan Aiken, a guy that you had mentioned just a little while ago on the hill for the Orioles. Aiken 6,100 on DK, 6,600 on on FanDuel, $27 on Yahoo. Cole Hamels, of course, debut for him here, 7,800 on DK, 7,500 on FanDuel, and $35 on Yahoo.
Yeah, not much interest in the pitching here for me. It came out right before the show started that Cole Hamels would be limited to, I think it was 55 to 65 pitches. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was in that range, like 65 pitches. So you're not expecting him to go deep into this game. Keegan Aiken had a really good start. His first big league start against the Yankees, his second one also against the Yankees, didn't get out of the first inning. Overall, he's just kind of a middling pitching prospect. He's just a guy that the Orioles basically are using. They view him as a reliever long-term, and they're just kind of using him to fill innings for the rest of the season because there's a gap in the Orioles system between their actual good pitching prospects and guys that are ready for the majors. So he's nothing really that you're going to be afraid of from a hitting standpoint. He's not someone that you're really looking to roster here in a tough matchup. So this is a game where I'm interested in the bats. Obviously from the Braves side, they come in with close to a 6 implied run total against Aiken. You have a lot of right-handed power here between Acuna, Ozuna, D'Arnaud, Swanson, Duvall, Riley. Like these guys all have so much power from the right side. Freeman obviously is a great hitter, left-handed as well. So the Braves look like they should be one of the more popular stacks tonight. They're in a great spot. But also on the Orioles side, you have Hamels making his first start. You don't really know what to expect there. He's obviously at the tail end of his career, but you do have some power and some cheap power in the Orioles lineup. Ryan Mountcastle at 3,300. I really don't know why he's still so cheap. This is like a legitimate hitting prospect who has come up and had immediate success and is still 3,300. Renato Nunez is cheap. Anzer Alberto is only 3,900. Like this is a team that, I had mentioned before that I thought the Royals would get some ownership because it would be pretty easy to go DeGrom and Cole with Kansas City. Baltimore's a team that, maybe if Kansas City is getting more ownership, you can look to Baltimore and take the same approach.
Yeah, Mike in chat, he had mentioned about that he was going to run with Orioles and Orioles and Royals stack here today, teaming up with Bundy and DeGrom. We'll talk about Bundy here in a little bit. I think we'll see as the day goes on of what the stack looks like, but you got to imagine the Braves are going to be pretty, top, one of the top ones.
Yeah, I just pulled up the top stack tool for DraftKings. Atlanta has the highest top stack percentage. They have the third highest aggregate ownership. So it looks like a good spot there. And then back to what I was mentioning about Kansas City versus Baltimore. We have Kansas City with the fourth highest top stack percentage, basically twice as high as Baltimore. But their aggregate ownership is like 3.5 times higher than Baltimore. So it looks like a spot where you can get a very similar build by going to the Orioles as Kansas City, but you'll get a lot less ownership on that lineup.
Of course, if you do have any questions on today's slate, leave those right there in YouTube or on our premium Slack account, as well as we will get to those questions as we go on throughout this show. Let's move on to the Rangers and the Astros. The Astros, the biggest betting favorite on tonight's slate. Of course, if you want to see the betting lines, go to Awesemo.com right at the top of the page, Odds Shopper, so you can price out where the best lines are at for this game. We got Kyle Gibson on the mound for the Rangers. Lance McCullers on the mound for the Astros. McCullers 7,500 on DK, 8,100 on FanDuel, $34 on Yahoo. Kyle Gibson, one of the cheapest pitchers on the slate, 5,900 on DK, 6,300 on FanDuel, and $25 on Yahoo.
I think McCullers looks like an appealing option here. He's coming back from the injured list, but he missed the minimum amount of time. He was dealing with neck pain, so it's not like it was an arm issue. I expect him to essentially be good to go here. Maybe doesn't get that one final inning, but I think that overall he should be fine. And the salary is really affordable against a Texas team that's been one of the most appealing teams to pick on in DFS this year. So I think McCullers looks like a really good mid-range option. We do have him projected for 40% ownership right now, which is the second highest on the slate behind Garrett Cole. So, obviously you're not getting any sort of ownership discount there, but it does look like a really, really good spot to go to for McCullers. As far as Gibson goes, the salary on him at $5,900 is less expensive than you're used to for him. He's just kind of an average pitcher, comes in with a 22% strikeout percentage against righties, 14% against lefties, giving up power to both sides of the plate. But it's really not a spot that I'm looking to get to just because the Astros are such a good offense. You have Alex Bregman back, which makes that lineup deeper as well. Carlos Correa, I believe, was injured last night, so we'll have to wait and see if he's in the lineup tonight. But it's still just so dangerous with Springer, Bregman, Brantley, Gurriel, Tucker. Like these guys are still so good. And so outside of maybe large field tournament considerations at low ownership, I don't really see much reason to get to Gibson.
In terms of those Astros bats and creating a stack off this lineup, is it a 3 or 4 man stack that you look at with their lineup?
I mean, it's as many as you can get to. Like the top of the order is just so good, and they're not really expensive either. There's nobody in Houston's lineup that's above 4,800 on DraftKings, which is really unusual. For Gibson, typically he is better against righties. This year the strikeout numbers are higher, but he has still allowed a 212 ISO to righties, 250 to lefties. So I think Kyle Tucker and Michael Brantley from the left side are going to look really good. Brantley in particular, only 3,300 on DraftKings for him, but you still can go Springer, Bregman, Brantley, Gurriel, Tucker, or go Correa over Gurriel if Correa is in the lineup, and you're going to be really happy with that stack, I think. And looking at the top stack tool right now, Houston 5th highest top stack percentage and 5th highest ownership. So basically projected to be owned how they should be.
And of course, this is the first start for McCullers since coming off the IR. First start since September the 4th. So that's something to play in there, as he had a little, I want to say it was a neck issue that he was dealing with, but he's back in this lineup. Obviously, as a one-off, everyone's going to look at Joey Gallo on the Rangers. That's always going to be that's an everyday thing just because of his home run ability. But is there anyone else in that Rangers lineup as a one-off that you think has some value?
Willie Calhoun's $2,000 on DraftKings. It's just a mispricing. It's obviously not a great matchup for him.
Yeah.
He hasn't lived up to his prospect status going back to his time with the Dodgers, but he does still have power. He is the minimum salary. Like he's priced the same as guys you've never heard of. So it's just another guy that you can use as value, and you're not really sacrificing a ton in the way of ceiling.
Of course, we talked earlier about DeGrom and Cole, and we're starting to get kind of some questions about that. So just kind of like, touch back on that. Austin was asking, do you take DeGrom over Cole? Another one says you could do one lineup with DeGrom, one with Cole. I mean, obviously that's talking about a 2-pitcher slate. But for people just kind of tuning in now, kind of explain why you think that there's a little more value on DeGrom over Cole.
Yeah, so right now Alex has DeGrom projected about 2 points higher than Garrett Cole, which it seems about right to me as well. I haven't run my own, but that's what I would expect to come in at a similar range to that. But then also looking at the ownership projections right now, we have Cole slightly higher than DeGrom. So, and I think that does make sense because they'll project similarly, and because Cole's a little bit cheaper. So I think you will see similar ownership, if not a little bit higher for Cole. But the fact that DeGrom projects higher and is either the same ownership or a little bit lower makes me lean towards him. He comes in with a higher strikeout percentage even though Cole's been very good this year with a 33% strikeout percentage, DeGrom still comes in at almost 38%. So even better there. It walks about the same as Cole. He's done a much better job limiting power. Cole's allowed 2 home runs per 9 this year. DeGrom's allowed 0.67. I did mention that I think it sets up as a favorable matchup for Cole because most of his power issues have been to left-handed hitters, and Toronto doesn't have a lot of left-handed power. So ultimately, I think it's 2 great pitching options. It's just that I think DeGrom is a little bit better, and right now the ownership doesn't suggest that you should be getting off of DeGrom.
Corsi brings up the point. He says a chalk Lance McCullers coming off an injury sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, but the thing you have to keep in mind is the salary too. Any any concerns that you're going to have are pretty much factored into a $7,500 salary facing Texas. So you don't want to just look at it and say, oh, he's coming off injury, he's popular, like go the other direction. Like there's so much more to it than that. A lot of it will come down to who else is in your lineup. If you're playing a popular stack and you're going with DeGrom or Cole, you probably don't want McCullers. You'll probably want to go to someone else and hope that McCullers has a disappointing outing. But basically, if you ignore all the outside circumstances and you take McCullers and you say he's facing Texas, like you're going to assume he's 8,500, 9K. So the fact that he's 7,500 here clearly is factoring in that he missed his last start and that there's some risk here.
Yeah, I mean, like, would you rather pay $7,500 for Lance McCullers or spend $1,300 less for Brady Singer in a harder matchup?
Right. It really does just come down to ownership considerations here. And like I said, that's a mistake I think a lot of people make, and we talk about it a lot, is that when they talk about ownership, they look at one specific player and say, like, this guy is too popular or not popular enough or whatever. It matters in the context of your entire lineup. So just looking at McCullers' ownership and saying he's too popular doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're stacking a team that is under-owned, you can play McCullers, and you should play McCullers because he's going to project as one of the best plays. So it really has to be looked at in the context of your entire lineup, what you're doing with it.
Especially when we're talking about a 9-game slate tonight, where you have, you got multiple options that you can go with. Obviously, we've talked about those high-end options. One of those high-end options is Giolito going for the White Sox, $10,200 on DK, $9,600 on FanDuel, $53 on Yahoo going up against the Twins. We got Jake Odorizzi on the hill for the Twins. Odorizzi, $8,000 on DK. When I looked a little earlier, there was no pricing on FanDuel at this time, and $27 on Yahoo.
Yeah, for Giolito, it's the toughest matchup out of the three at the top between DeGrom, Cole, and himself. Minnesota is just a tough lineup to strike out. They have a lot of power. So it's not the ceiling is still there for Giolito, but I would want a pretty big ownership discount on him if I'm going to him over DeGrom or Cole. Right now, there is an ownership gap, but it's not that big. On DraftKings right now, we have Cole at 44%, DeGrom at 40%, Giolito at 24%. If it gets a little bit bigger, like if you start to see DeGrom and Cole go up and then Giolito drop down to 10 to 15%, it starts to become interesting there, just because he is such a good pitcher. He does come in with a 34.2% strikeout percentage, which is right between DeGrom and Cole. He's just been great this year. There's no real question about it. But he's getting enough ownership where I would just rather go with DeGrom, who's the better pitcher, facing half of the Phillies AAA lineup, and Cole, who is a very similar pitcher, a little bit better, a little bit worse, you can debate, but facing a bunch of righties for Toronto. So as it stands right now, I would rather go to DeGrom and Cole, but that is a spot you can pay attention to ownership, because the ceilings are very, very similar. And so if there starts to be a big gap in ownership, you can roster Giolito and just hope that he outperforms the other two.
Joe, appreciate your message there in the super chat. Appreciate you chiming in here on a Wednesday morning as we talk about today's MLB slate, mentioning that he won't be risking his hair like he did for MMA a couple weeks ago, as did not work out well for him when he mentioned about that. But in terms of those Twins bats, you mentioned about the strikeouts, in terms of Giolito in that spot. But as you look up and down that Twins lineup, is this a good spot for them?
No, because Giolito is really good. It's still a pretty low probability spot. If you look at the top stack percentage right now, we actually have Minnesota in the middle of the pack, 4.5% chance of being the top stack, only 2.9% aggregate ownership. So to me, that does look like a team you could get to in large field tournaments, and you're basically just betting on how much power is in this lineup. You understand that it's not a high probability spot, but there's just so much power that if they can somehow get to Giolito and get him out of the game early, or Giolito just has one of his bad starts, you're getting a lot of power at low ownership. But in smaller field tournaments, I don't think it's quite as appealing, just because the top stack, it's still a low probability spot, and they're not really that cheap. So you're not going to get the best pitching with them either. So more of a large field tournament stack than a smaller field, I think, and probably more of a full stack spot than one-off hitters, because you basically, there's not any one hitter that's going to look like a great play against Lucas Giolito because of how good he is. So basically your hope would be that Giolito just has, one of the 10% of the time that he's going to come out and just be awful. And in that case, you would want, as many hitters against him as you can get.
In terms of the White Sox bats, I mean, sometimes they can be a little expensive to get to a stack of getting the proper stack that you would like to get to. But should they be a target going against Odorizzi?
Yeah, I think the answer is pretty much yes, always with the White Sox. Odorizzi hasn't pitched much this year. He's only thrown about 225 total pitches. He is someone that throughout most of his career has struggled with right-handed power. He fixed it a bit last year. He started throwing his slider more. Over the very, very limited sample this year, he's allowed a massive amount of power to righties. But there's just so much right-handed power in this lineup with Anderson, Abreu, Jimenez, Encarnacion, and Robert. These guys all have a ton of power. You also have the left-handed guys in Grandal and Moncada. It's just a really high upside stack. The stack is expensive too, which should keep ownership down. Right now we have them with a 5% top stack percentage, only 2.1% aggregate ownership. So it's very similar in terms of top stack percentage versus ownership to the Twins, except it's a little bit higher probability because they're facing Jake Odorizzi and not facing Lucas Giolito.
Yeah, it's there's probably a stack that I'm definitely going to look at. Of course, you already see right now there in the chat about today's promo that we have going on right now this week, as is US Open is here, and get 50% off a PGA weekly when you use the promo code BOGIE. See the link right there in the YouTube chat when you look into get access to all of our golfer projections, ownership projections, the top golfers tool, and so much more for PGA. You guys sign up right now for an Awesemo Plus PGA weekly pass. You got to use Bogey at checkout. This is a limited time offer. It does expire today. So head over to awesemo.com/join to sign up right now for a Awesemo Plus golf weekly pass. Moving on to the next game, we got the Indians and the Cubs. Savelli going for the Indians and Lester going for the Cubs.
Yeah, so I think anyone that has watched more than one of my shows knows how I feel about John Lester, and it doesn't change here. The Indians not a spot where I'm looking to get to Lester. Not much in the way of strikeout upside for him. The salary is not super cheap, so I don't really see much appeal there. The strikeouts he does get typically come against left-handed bats. 28% of lefties have struck out against him this year compared to 17% of righties. The Indians have a lineup full of right-handed hitters and switch hitters. So not a very appealing spot there for him. As far as Aaron Savali goes, he has actually been pretty good this year. Surprisingly good in terms of basically everything. 24% strikeout percentage, only walking 4% of hitters. So pretty good numbers there. The salary isn't the most appealing at $8,600 because it is $1,100 more than McCullers. It's $2,400 more than Brady Singer against the Tigers. So it should keep his ownership down. Right now on DraftKings, we have him projected for 8% ownership. That's a spot that you can definitely look to get to in tournaments, just because he is a pretty good pitcher and the salary is fine. It's just not like quote unquote optimal. The Cubs matchup isn't the best. You do have some strikeouts in there with guys like Happ and Baez, but also, Rizzo, very difficult to strike out. That'll drive down strikeout percentage. Hayward can be tough to strike out. So I think kind of just an average matchup, average spot for Savali. The main reason that you would consider him is just that he's pretty talented and he's really low owned.
Yeah, I mean, $8,600 on both DraftKings and FanDuel, and $40 over on Yahoo. I don't mind the $8,600 price tag on DK when I'm looking at, that under 9K options.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fine price tag as far as the range of outcomes for Savali goes. He can very easily give you like 3 times that salary and be a really good play. It's not an optimal salary because like when you build your cash lineup or build your optimal lineup, you're going to get a better projection by going down, by either going up and getting both of the aces or 2 of the aces, or by going down and getting McCullers or Singer or whoever. So it's that will keep his ownership down, and it's the kind of spot where in tournaments you can kind of take advantage of it.
Yeah, I just don't see any way why I would ever roster John Lester at this point.
Nope.
I mean, I honestly like. For people who roster him, I want to say why. Is it just like you're going, hey man, he's low owned, I'm going to take a shot? Like, is that to me, like that's the only reason?
Well, and the salary just never gets low enough because it's just like, it's John Lester. Like if you were $6K or something, then sure. but he'd also be like 50% owned because it's John Lester. So, yeah, I mean, it's, and this, like I said before, this isn't a spot that you look at and think he has a really high chance of success, because not only does the top part of the Cleveland lineup strike out at a low rate, but there's just so many right-handed bats here. Like in their projected lineup, the only left-handed hitter in there is Mike Freeman. So, you're talking about a bunch of righties that have power, some of which have really low strikeout percentages against a pitcher who strikes out 16.7% of righties and has allowed a 230 ISO to him this year. I actually am kind of surprised that Cleveland's implied run total is as low as it is at 4.5.
Any reason why you think it's that low?
The wind's not blowing out in Wrigley, so it plays like it doesn't look like it's blowing in, but it should play at least, if not in favor of the pitching, it should at least play pretty neutral. And then also it's like 70 degrees, so the ball's not going to carry. I'm guessing that the weather mostly is the reason.
Who's your value bet on the Indians in this spot?
Carlos Santana is only 3,500, so that stands out. You also can look to Jordan Luplow or Oscar Mercado at 2,200. Those are both pretty crazy salaries. You do run some pinch hit risk with Luplow, but 20
at Awesemo.com daily. Today it is the MLB lineup builder. So when you're looking to build those lineups, you got to go over to Awesemo.com to build those lineups over there. Today's free premium content is the MLB lineup builder. Now, our final two games, another one of the big favorites tonight is the Angels. Dylan Bundy going for the Angels. Caleb Smith going for the D-backs.
Yeah, this one it gives us another pitcher that's not getting a lot of ownership, but that does give you a really high ceiling. Right now you have Dylan Bundy coming in with like 9.5, 10% ownership on DraftKings. And just like we talked about Savali, I think it makes sense. That's probably like he should come in with lower ownership because he's priced close enough to Cole that you're going to just want to go to Garrett Cole. But you're still getting a really high ceiling from Dylan Bundy. He's been very good this year since coming to the Angels. Comes in with a 29% strikeout percentage, only a 6% walk percentage. Pitching in Arizona does help to alleviate his home run issues. One negative to point to for him is that his strikeout numbers, even going back to his time with the Orioles, but also this year, his strikeout numbers are much, much better against right-handed hitters than lefties. He struck out 36% of righties this year. He's only struck out 24% of lefties. The Angels lineup is projected to only have 3 right-handed bats in it. So if you get the Diamondbacks lineup. If you get the normal Arizona lineup, it's going to knock Bundy's projection down a little bit. It is something you want to factor in that, his strikeout stuff just isn't as good against lefties. He relies very heavily on his slider to get swings and misses against righties. And that's a pitch that he doesn't throw nearly as much to lefties. If he's throwing at 47% to righties, it's an elite pitch, 26.8% swinging strike percentage. He's only throwing at 10% to lefties. So that's why you see much, much lower strikeout numbers. So if we do get the normal Arizona lineup, it will keep my expectations for Bundy in check. But he is getting, pretty low ownership here.
His salary is a little higher than Savelli, 9,100 as opposed to 8,600 on DK, 9,800 versus 8,600. Is he a better play tonight than Savelli?
I think they're pretty much the same. I pulled up Alex's projections. He actually has them as the exact same point per dollar play. So a slightly higher projection going to Bundy, but also a slightly higher salary. I think that they're really, like, even in theory, they're like the same play, basically. They are in matchups that aren't great. They aren't optimal as far as roster construction goes, but they're good enough pitchers that it wouldn't surprise anyone if they just go out there and give you 25 points. I think that if I have to choose one, I would lean towards it. Assuming Arizona goes with their normal lineup, I would lean towards Savali just because he is a little bit cheaper. If Arizona, for whatever reason, has an extra righty or two in there, it would swing in favor of Bundy.
In terms of, you mentioned about what could be in the lineup today if Arizona goes into it with their normal lineup, you target and what the Angels could go with. Are you targeting the Angels going up against Caleb Smith? I mean, third start of the year, second start with the D-backs, since coming over to that trade from the Marlins. Is that a spot you're looking at as we get later in the day?
Yeah, I think so because, and again, it's a pitcher. Smith's the pitcher that I like full stacking against because he has good strikeout stuff, but he also gives up power and he also walks a lot of guys. So when you're taking individual bats, and this isn't to say that you shouldn't just take Mike Trout or just take Anthony Rendon, like obviously those guys are phenomenal, but The issue, the risk you take that you run into is that you can just very easily get a guy that walks 3 times because Caleb Smith can't throw a strike. Whereas when you full stack against him, if he's having that kind of start where he is walking guys, you're getting a lot of guys on base. You're getting more at bats. You're able to take advantage of that because you correlated throughout your lineup, and then hopefully you get 1 or 2, 3-run home runs after he walks guys. So against high walk pitchers like Smith, it's typically more like I prefer stacking against them as opposed to taking one offs in a perfect world. But yeah, I do think this is a spot you can get to. The problem you're going to run into though is that it's outside. So the guys that you want are really expensive. Like Trout, $6,300. It's Mike Trout, that's fine, but it's still a really expensive price tag. Rendon's $5,800 on DraftKings. David Fletcher is $5,300. Like that's a really expensive price tag for a guy like Fletcher that puts the ball in play but doesn't have a ton of power. And then you get beyond that, you just get the guys that you don't really want. Albert Pujols is bad. Justin Upton sucks now. Like there's not much in this lineup beyond Trout and Rendon. So that makes it kind of tough to love stacking them. Looking at the top stack tool right now, their ownership is relatively low, though. They have a 7.5% chance of being the top stack, 4.1% ownership percentage. If that holds, then it probably will just be a case where I just don't look. I just look away and ignore the fact that I'm rostering some hitters that I really hate.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the box scores this morning and knew when I was doing the show with you when I saw Justin Upton hit a home run. Got a little chuckle.
Yeah. I mean, he does at least have the platoon advantage here. Maybe he will strike out less than 45% of the time.
Yeah, of course. We got one more game to go here. And if you do have any questions on tonight's slate, leave those right there on YouTube. Also, be sure to hit the thumbs up button on YouTube. It does help us out a lot as well. Now, of course, if you want to get access to our player projections, ownership projections, the top stack tool, you got to sign up for an Awesemo Plus MLB weekly pass for $15.95. All you got to do to sign up today is go to awesemo.com/join. Our final game of the night is going to be the Giants and the Mariners. Of course, they were supposed to be playing in Seattle. However, due to the air quality in Seattle, the game has been moved to San Francisco. Seattle will be the home team. Of course, last night it was Tyler Anderson was supposed to go for the Giants. Right now, list on Mlb.com, they list Drew Smyly as a starter for the Giants and Newsom as a starter for the Mariners. We're going to kind of have to see if that does change throughout the day. Maybe the guys that were supposed to go last night get the start here or not. So that kind of makes it a little difficult in breaking this one down.
So we do have confirmation that Drew Smyly is starting. According to The Athletic, at least, he's getting the start for the Giants. So you get him coming off of 59 pitches his last time out against San Diego. The most pitches he's thrown in a game this year is 71. So you're not expecting him to go too deep into this game. He is only 7,100, and it is a good matchup against Seattle. Smyly does have decent strikeout stuff as well. Going back to last season, he struck out 26% of righties, 19% of lefties. You could throw a dart at him in tournaments, kind of as a pivot to McCullers. He doesn't have the same, I don't think he has the same ceiling as McCullers because of pitch count concerns, but he has enough strikeout stuff where, like, if he gives you 5 innings and McCullers has a bad start, he can, obviously beat McCullers. And so that's kind of the approach you'd be taking there. It's not someone that I would want a large percentage of, but he is cheap enough and has enough strikeout stuff that you can take a shot at him. LJ Newsom on the other side hasn't gone more than 60 pitches yet. And he's 6,300, so he's cheap, but it's not like he's priced for 4 innings or anything like that. So between the two pitchers, if I go to one, I would look to Smyly.
Yeah, we'll have seen on DraftKings 7,100 for Drew Smyly in this one. Obviously, he hasn't gone more than 4 innings, so that's obviously something we're going to consider. In terms of the bats here, obviously we've talked throughout this season about the fences being moved in at Oracle Park, but does anything on the hitting side in this game interest you?
The Giants look like pretty decent values. They're another really cheap team outside of Yastrzemski, who's 5,100. But beyond him, the most expensive hitter in their projected lineup is Evan Longoria at 4,100. You're facing, LJ Newsom, who obviously has like 3 or 4 appearances in the big leagues. So far, he's allowed some power. 353 ISO to righties, 188 to lefties. His in DFS.
Mike saying Mountcastle continues to be criminally underpriced.
Yeah, no question about that. I really have no idea how he's as cheap as he is. It's not sometimes you'll see hitters come up and they hit well, but you have their body of work in the minor leagues, and you say like, yeah, okay, it's a fluke, it's going to go away. The guy raked in the minor leagues. He's one of the top hitting prospects, and he comes up and is crushing in the majors. Like, I'm not saying that he needs to be 5K or something, but pricing him like he's just some utility player is clearly wrong.
Josh says, and this is because we'll start to wrap up here with some listener question. There's a bunch of value to get 2 high-end SPs today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And if you're doing that, you just want to pay attention to the ownership of your lineup, like we talked about before. Like I mentioned it as we went through the slate, but like right now, looking at the top stack tool, Kansas City is one of those teams that you can use to get to 2 expensive pitchers. They're getting about 14% aggregate ownership. San Francisco, another team you could use if you ignore Yastrzemski, getting 13% aggregate ownership. The Orioles, though, are a team that you could use in a less appealing spot because they're facing Hamels and the bullpen, as opposed to LJ Newsome or Tarik Skubal. But the same kind of thing. They're really cheap. Their range of outcomes really isn't different than Kansas City or San Francisco, but they're getting a third of the ownership or even less than that. So you do want to pay attention to the ownership there. Make sure that your highest projected teams are going to probably be 2 expensive pitchers and then value bats. You just want to make sure that if you're going that route, you're playing lower owned value bats, because there's nothing really worse in tournaments than playing a bunch of really highly owned below average hitters like that everyone else is playing. So just pay attention to the ownership if you're going that roster construction route. But I do agree with all the value bats that there's a lot of ways to do it.
Mike also mentioned he feels that Kyle Lewis for the Mariners has an amazing value on Yahoo at $15.
Yes, he does. Yeah, that's about the polar opposite of his DraftKings price, where he's 5K.
Yeah, it's we're always looking for those values. Of course, you got to go over to Awesemo.com. You can sign up for an Awesemo Plus MLB Weekly Pass for $15.95, and our free premium content of the day is the MLB Lineup Builder, so you can check that out throughout the day as you're building your lineup. Obviously, is there a pitcher on tonight's slate that you're paying attention to his ownership more than others?
I guess it would be Brady Singer, just because I don't know how necessary he even is on this slate because of how many cheap bats there are. And the fact that while McCullers and DeGrom are expensive, they're not super expensive. So I'm not really sure yet how necessary Singer even is. But I will pay attention to his ownership because his range of outcomes is so wide, where if he were to get a lot of ownership, it's going to be really easy to get away from him and just pay up more for pitching. If he were to get very little ownership, then there starts to be more of an advantage to just getting as many good bats as you can, knowing that a lot of the field's going to be paying up for pitching. Right now, we have him coming in around 20%, which is probably where he should be, and I don't think there's a big edge one way or the other. But he's one guy who I could see his ownership kind of drastically moving one way or the other as we get closer to lock.
I'm looking at, on the FanDuel side of things, what does ownership look like outside of DeGrom, Giolito, and Cole? And can I find a pitcher I like to kind of counter that high ownership of those 3 guys?
Well, and right now we have McCullers actually is the highest owned pitcher there too at 23%.
Yeah, if that stays the same, I'm definitely looking at those high end options.
Yeah, exactly. If it holds how it is right now, I would just much rather be getting to Cole and DeGrom.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, coming up next, we got NFL show right here on Awesemo.com, so stay tuned for that. Of course, I'll be back tonight for the MMA strategy show. Myself and Pete Rogers Jr. We will go live at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time to preview Saturday's UFC Fight Night card, Covington versus Woodley. So that is going to do it for this edition of the MLB strategy show right here on Awesemo.com.